Hello everyone, my name is Loko and welcome to some more StarCraft 2. Now in this video I'm gonna show you a much longer Zerg vs Zerg than most of the Zerg vs Zergs are that are currently being played in the Legacy of the Void beta. Hopefully from this video you will be able to figure out that Zerg vs Zerg can be a very awesome matchup, especially once it progresses a little bit more. In this specific game, we're going to be opening up with some very aggressive Zergling bailing aggression. However, a little bit later on into the game, we sort of both go into untested waters in places where we don't really know what to do. This is going to be a game that is about, I believe it's like 17 minutes long or something like that, so, you know, I'm going to spoil the result. I will end up winning this game. However, not without trying pretty much every single unit in the game. In this game, we will see me focus a lot on Roach, Hydra, Ravager, Lurker, so I play more of like a standard, quote-unquote, standard style. But my opponent, Nixie, who is like rank 100 Grandmaster, at this very moment of me recording this video, he is going for a very cool style where he focuses on Link Banelings early on, switches towards Mutalisks, and that might not be surprising for anyone, but then he goes for Lurkers and eventually transitions towards Ultralisk and Vipers, and he accidentally puts in a Swarm Host there as well. Now, I actually do not ever go up to Hive in this game, but that is simply because I don't know exactly what to do in these kind of scenarios. So this is a really fun little game that should at the very least show you that once the middle part of the game is reached, which is currently not the case for like 90% of all the Zerg for the Zergs, there are countless options that are yet to be discovered. And that is the awesome thing about new expansions, about the Legacy of the Void in general. There's a lot more focus on micro, and with that there is a lot more potential for coming back. Now, as it is currently in Heart of the Swarm, you guys will probably be fully aware that Heart of the Swarm is almost exclusively Roach versus Roach battles. So what sort of happens is that one player goes for Roaches, the other gets 10 more drones, and then the player with more Roaches wins. However, if the player with 10 more drones manages to hold on, he will get a slightly bigger economy, and therefore can make more Roaches for the next attack, right? And that's basically what Zerg vs Zerg is all about in Heart of the Swarm. And while it is fun, I actually really enjoy that, it is not very much fun to be watching as a spectator, because it's honestly just a game of drones. And in the game of drones, you win or you die, right? Like, that's basically it. And in Legacy of the Void, even though I'm like with an economy deficit for a major part in this game, the fact that I am going for a different unit composition that is a little bit better to deal with than my, or it's a little bit better than what my opponent has to deal with mine, it is actually possible for me to come back in all kinds of scenarios. So this should be a really fun little game to see exactly that. So what we're opening up with right here is very, very standard. What most players are doing currently in Legacy of the Void is to get a very quick third hatchery, either in base or at the third base, for the simple reason that queens not only generate 2 larvae each, and since injects are automatic, you know, there's a lot more focus on the Link Bailing micro in general. A lot of people are feeling more confident in that sense. So you're gonna get a quick third hatchery, you're gonna get queens, and then you're gonna start making a couple drones and then a heck of a lot of Zerglings. So that's exactly what we're seeing right now. Now I'm looking around with the Zerglings that I have, I see, okay, my opponent's making a bailing nest, we see 3 queens up in total, which is a little bit more uncommon, and most importantly, I do see the lack of a third hatchery right now. I am gonna make my third hatch myself right here, and I'm still trying to squeeze in a couple of workers. So far you can see my opponent actually is slightly greedier, maybe he's a little more experienced with the early game in Zerg vs Zerg. But anyway, I got the third hatchery going up right now, and I'm gonna be using that for larva production for the main part, or for the most part, at least early on. But eventually I do obviously want to transition towards that base. Now in Legacy of the Void, in general, you will lose the mineral patches in the main base right around the 10-minute mark, at which point you're gonna have to transition anyway. So most of the time when you make a third hatchery and you're not sure where to take it, you're probably better off not building it in base, but instead going for the third. Because oftentimes, if there's like endless Link Bailing micro, and you know, a lot of people are very good at the Link Bailing micro, you will see the game go past the 10-minute mark. However, knowing that my opponent now also went for the third hatchery, and seeing that he isn't really making a big amount of Zerglings thus far, I decide to go for a bit of a faster lair, a Roach Warren, and an Evo Chamber. Now that is also due to the fact that I saw 3 queens early on and the lack of a hatchery, so I felt like this was an okay move, although if my opponent would commit heavily into tons of Zerglings right now, I would have to play extremely defensive, and it may very well be a little bit too greedy, and that's what I found for the most part in Zerg vs Zerg right now. The player that transitions first to Link Bailing, or out of Link Bailing, but tries to do so at least, will usually end up losing. So I try and run the Zerglings up in the main base right there, try and figure out what is going on. Sadly, don't get too much information, but, you know, I know at the very least that my opponent is in a very defensive posture, that he made 3 queens, that he made an extra hatchery, and for the very fact that he made a spine crawler as well. So right now, I'm feeling relatively confident to at least, like, make a couple more drones, and now that the lair has finished up, I will be able to start up the Roach speed as well. So very standard so far. Heart of the Swarm-esque, I guess I could say, where, you know, I basically made drones early on, did a little bit of pressure, and now I'm transitioning into a +1/+1 roach speed timing attack. Now, since I'm at Lair, I'm also going to be making an Overseer right here to try and figure out what my opponent is up to. And I'm going to try and see what he is going for. For the most part, I want to know whether or not he's going for a Spire or whether or not he's going for Roaches. And those seem to be the most common options, at least early on into the mid-game in Zerg vs Zerg. So I'm checking around right here. I see a lot of gas taken. I see no Roach Warrens or Evo Chambers or lack of anything, really. So I'm still flying around right here trying to figure out what's going on. And I do notice that there is gonna be the Spire already on its way. Now, one thing that I don't actually see at this point in the game, which I really should be looking for, is this building right here. This is a Hydra Den. And what my opponent is going for is not just a Spire, but he's throwing down a Hydra Den immediately and morphs that into a Lurker Den immediately as well. So his plan right now is to simply put some pressure on me, force me to be back home, and therefore, you know, make sure that he gets time out to get the Lurkers going. Usually Lurkers are extremely good on the ground. They dominate everything on the ground, pretty much. But getting them out is sort of the difficult part. So he's trying to buy time, use the extra gases from the third base that he got so early on. But instead of me sitting back, I decided to move out. I've played plenty against Mutalisks with Roaches in the Heart of the Swarm, and I'm like, okay, since I still have, you know, double upgrades, and since I can also make some Ravagers here, I can be very powerful. And in the meantime, what I'm gonna do is drone up behind it. At least, yeah, there we go. I do start the 3 drones up right now. So +1/+1 is done. Or at least +1 armor is about to finish up. And I'm gonna see whatever damage I can do. Now keep in mind, +1/+1 is way stronger against Zerglings than unupgraded Roaches are. Basically makes it so that they survive for a couple more hits and that they 2-shot Zerglings rather than 3-shot them. So effectively my Roaches are extremely powerful against the Zerglings right now. And even though I know he's going Spire, I do not want him to think that I can just, you know, that he just can make a ton of units right here for absolutely nothing. So I am moving forward right here, and as you can see, I am doing a pretty substantial amount of damage thus far. Now, my opponent hasn't been droning up the third base. If he would have, I would have gotten a massive advantage right now. But retreating for me isn't really an option anymore since I have committed. I am making a ton of drones right now at home, gonna transition towards more Roaches. But at this point in the game, as you can see, I am 53 health versus up against 44. So I gained a slight little advantage, and this is what most of the Zerg vs Zergs that you know are all about. From here on out, we're gonna be in very untested waters. There's a couple changes to Mutalisk, specifically for Zerg vs Zerg. The Muta is still the same unit. However, one of the changes that is made is that Spore Crawlers are now a heck of a lot weaker against them. Like, for example, they used to 3-shot them, I believe. Right now it takes a couple, I believe it takes like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 shots to kill a Mutalisk. So Spore Crawlers are not nearly as good anymore. Hydralisks have their upgrades combined, and while those two things don't change everything up too much, the fact that they can transition towards Lurkers changes everything. The fact that Lurkers are even a unit is already pretty crazy, but basically the idea behind the Lurker is that they do bonus damage against Roaches. So if you see that your opponent is going up against Roaches, you gotta be extremely cautious with your Roach positioning and with your ground army positioning in general, because if you do not have vision, when the Lurkers start hitting your army, you're gonna lose and you're gonna have a really bad day, and you'll see me make a mistake in that very shortly as well. But anyways, I'm gonna transition towards more upgrades. I'm adding on my Hydralisk right now to deal with the Mutalisk, not yet knowing that my opponent is going for the Mutalisk, or for the Lurkers, and I'm trying to just figure out what is going on. Now, would I have noticed, or would I have known that this is a thing where people go for a quick Hydra then? I definitely would have been a little more cautious, and probably moved in a couple of Ravagers here as well. So, I noticed right here, okay, that Muta Ball doesn't seem to be very big. Right? Like, if I don't see the Muta Ball grow, I'm assuming that he's gonna switch to Roaches, or at least a ground-focused army, because if he's not adding on extra Mutas, he's gonna be spending his resources elsewhere. Now, I do want to move out shortly. Now that +2/+2, or actually +2 attack only, is about to finish up, it is a good time for me to start moving out. And I do want to knock down the rocks as well, so I can potentially start going for a 4th base, knowing that my main base is already about to mine out. Gonna also put down my Hydra Den, or my Infestation Pit right now as well, to potentially switch towards Ultralisk very later on into the game, or maybe even Greater Spire units if I really want to. So I do want to move out right now. I see the Mutas, he's trying to contain me, I'm not gonna fall for it. I'm gonna use my reinforcing units to deal with those Mutas instead, and I'm gonna be going for the 4th base as a backup. Trying to just use my Spore Crawlers and the positioning of my army to make sure that he doesn't do a ton of damage. But here we go. My opponent actually going for a bit of a Lurker drop in my mineral line, and he's trying to deal maximum amounts of damage. Now, in the meantime, he's also pushing in with Zerglings, and I am trying to move across the map with his Mutalisk trying to pick off my army. He also has a couple of Zerglings picking away at my 4th base, but now knowing that I'm good, I'm gonna move up the ramp. However, I do not see that my opponent has Lurkers. So you see the supply drop right there? I don't know exactly how much supply I was on. I'm assuming it was like 130 or something. I lost a ton of roaches right there for absolutely no reason, moving up the ramp. So what was going on at that point? Zerglings at my fort base, a lurker drop in my main base, Mutalisk in the middle of the map trying to pick off my reinforcements, and I need to defend against all of that while pushing with my main army, right? Legacy of the Void is extremely multitask focused, and right now I know that my opponent is gonna be going for lurkers. So I gotta be careful here. Roaches deal, you know, roaches just absolutely melt towards or to lurkers. But what I'm gonna do is morph in Ravagers. Ravagers do not take bonus damage from lurkers at all, and the corrosive bio ability is very good at dealing with it. In the next patch, it's gonna actually increase the range of it as well, so it's gonna be really good. And I got more Hydras right now as well to deal with the Mutalisk. It looks like he added on a couple more, or at the very least, he, you know, I will need something to do with the Mutas that he has right now. And I'm gonna try and land the Ravager corrosive bio ability in the middle of all the lurkers. Now, lurkers are actually surprisingly tanky, so when you commit to killing them, you commit to killing them. There is no way around it. If you don't commit completely, you're gonna lose all of your army. So I'm gonna shove my army forward right here, taking the risk, knowing that there is a big chance that I could lose my entire army, but there's no option for me to really switch up right now. Zerglings in the meanwhile, coming from the left side of the main, or on the left side of the map, and actually going towards my natural as well as my main base right now. And I need to make sure that I defend both my third base from the Mutalisk, while also making sure that my fourth base, you know, gets picked off and that I cancel it in time. But I need to be dealing with a ton of different things at the meantime. Now, if you take a quick look at my opponent's side of the map instead, we can see that he is transitioning towards a hive. He's getting the Roach Warren right now eventually as well. And what he's planning on, by the melee upgrades, you can see it's very late on upgrading, he is going to go for an Ultralisk transition in the late game. And that is something that I have not played against that much yet. But one thing that I do know is that if my opponent decides to go for that, I already have the option to go for the Lurker switch. The only problem with that is that Lurkers are extremely good against Ultralisk, except when they get Blinding Cloud. You know, when they'll get Blinding Clouded. So if he goes for Vipers and he Blinding Clouds my Lurkers, I'm gonna go down very quickly, and I need to be spreading out my my Lurkers to make sure that I don't get contested too much, but also that I need a ton of gas in order to support more than, like, let's say 5 Lurkers. I need to be babysitting those units constantly, because losing them right now would be a massive commitment, since there are 150 minerals and 150 gas each. Now I'm gonna be moving out across the map once again. This time around I do have overseers with my army, and I have a couple Lurkers of my own. Got a lot of Ravagers left over as well, and I see, okay, hey, there's actually a bunch of units a bunch of drones moving towards his fort base. The fact that he's been droning up, or at least made some drones to go for that fort base, gives me a lot of time right now to go and do some aggression in the natural. Mutalisks are out of position right now as well. I got my fort base coming up, and I'm trying to do whatever damage I can with the army that I got. Now, it turns out my opponent actually has been tacking up, and right now I'm fully aware that he has been tacking up because he doesn't have a very big army at all. As you can see, he's been trying to save up minerals and gas right there for a long time to start squeezing out those ultras immediately, but my opponent actually moving forward right now as well with a bunch of the lurkers. I will need to pick those off immediately. I don't know if I have enough Hydralisks left over right now to be dealing with those Mutalisks, and it doesn't seem to be the case. So once again, my opponent will manage to hold on. I know right now that he has a fort base as well. What I'm gonna do is actually send my reinforcing units towards the fort base, knowing that I saw the drones move, you know, around this little ledge. The rocks are not taken out, so he's gonna have a hard time defending both of those at once. But the fact that my opponent was not having a big army right there is a huge indication for me that he is likely switching towards something that can deal with my army very well. I'm assuming that's gonna be Ultralisk, because there is no way my opponent is just not macroing well. So I'm gonna be moving forward to the fort base right now, try and see whatever damage I can do. I know that he still has Mutalisk out as well, so the Mutalisk are gonna be there to try and pick off whatever they can. But I know that at the very least as well that these these Roaches are gonna be quite tanky at this point in the game, and Mutas are gonna take forever to do anything. So at this point in time, we have really been, we've really been trading blows right now. I've killed 25 workers, he killed 24 of mine. He's killing a couple right now as well. But at this point in the game, I'm not feeling too confident anymore. Even though I killed his third base, and even though I killed his natural, I know that he has Ultralisk right now, and if he goes for any kind of Blinding Cloud, my Lurkers are gonna be very, very, very squishy. So what I need to do in the next engagement, knowing that it's gonna be likely Roach Hydra Lurker, or Roach Hydra Ravager Lurker, versus Ultralisk, Zergling, and maybe a couple of Vipers in there for the Blinding Cloud, what I need to do is spread out my Lurkers and unburrow them in time to make sure that I mitigate as much damage of those Blinding Clouds as possible. And that's exactly what I'm doing right now already. I'm trying to, you know, make sure that I spread out my Lurkers, also to make sure that the Ultralisks don't use their splash damage against the unit, and I'm trying to make whatever army I can make right now. As you can see, both of us are pretty resource starved. My opponent actually having a ton of gas, So he's gonna be adding on the Lurk or the Vipers right now, which seems to be a very good army composition. I mean, Ultralisk got buffed obviously to the point where they have 7 armor fully upgraded. And Zerglings now also have that Adrenal Glands upgrade that gives them 40% extra attack speed rather than 18 in Heart of the Swarm. So his army is very, very powerful. But I also know that Lurkers will do everything on the ground as long as they are fighting. If I actually manage to get a good engagement down right now, I know that I can take this army. If I mess up the engagement completely, however, it is going to be very difficult for me to get anything done. So right now, I know I need to start moving. I cannot have him take the fort base again, and I see him take the fort base right now as well. It's almost fully done, and I cannot really be waiting anymore. So what I'm gonna do very shortly is unburrow and start moving across the map. Even though my army is small, and even though I know that he has Ultralisk out, I cannot sit back here. If I let him get that mining going, I'm likely gonna be going down right now. So I'm just saving up whatever I can, adding on more and more Hydras right now. I think I'm gonna morph in a couple more Lurkers or maybe some Ravagers here as well. Yeah, I do actually decide to go for a couple more Ravagers, just to make sure that if he has Lurkers of his own lying around somewhere, they will not be taking out all of my Roaches. And I'm gonna start moving across the map right now. Unburrowed everything, as you can see. I have my Lurkers on one hotkey group, completely dedicated to that unit instead. And in the middle part of the map though, there's a lot of Mutalisks still hanging around. I do know I have enough Hydras at this point to be taking that out, so I'm not too worried about that. And I'm trying to think right here, where do I want to engage? Do I want to move up the ramp? Probably not. If my opponent has Lurkers, it's going to be a really bad idea. And I need some more space in order to use my Lurkers effectively against a potential blinding cloud. So what I'm going to do is actually leapfrog the Lurkers forward a little bit, trying to keep them spread out while moving out across the map. And I'm going to be burrowing right here. Not the most beautiful burrow as of right now. I see the Ultras and I see the blinding cloud. Going to immediately unburrow a couple of those that are affected by it. Keep in mind, the Ultralisk are dealing tons of damage, and he's also affecting my Hydras and my Roaches and the Ravagers with the ability as well. But since most of my Lurkers were moved out in time, I do manage to clean up most of that Ultralisk fort right now, as well as killing off that fort base. Gotta be moving forward once again, trying to make sure that not all my Lurkers burrow at the exact same place. Instead, trying to spread them out a little bit to mitigate any of the blinding cloud, even though I know I lost, or I killed most of his Vipers at this point in the game. And as you can see, eventually I will start pushing forward and winning the game. Now, this is pretty insane, right? Like, it basically contained every single unit that you can be going for, and I wouldn't be surprised if someone figures out the way to go for some Brute Lords in this army composition as well. Brute Lords would be extremely potent against everything right here, because besides a couple of the Mutas, does he really want to switch back into Corruptor? Probably not. And since I can also be dealing with his Mutas earlier on into the game with Corruptors, the switch towards Brute Lords might be a lot more logical later on into the game. So there's still a ton to discover Zerg vs Zerg. I am convinced that Zerg vs Zerg will be an amazing matchup once it gets figured out a little bit more, and I don't think it's going to be very many Roach vs Roach battles, and I think most of us should be cheering for that. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, make sure you hit the like button down below, and if you want to see more Legacy of the Void content, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. I want to thank you guys all for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, and I'll see you in the next one.